Hello, everybody. I'm Jackie K. Cooper, and my entertainment rundown for today is a continuation of me telling you the story of how I got from there to here, how I became a critic on YouTube, etc., but how the early stages of my career developed because I want you to have some guidelines. Maybe that's it, or have me as a mentor to you to if you want to pursue journalism, writing a book, doing movie reviews, etc. Because a lot of you have written me and said, how did you get to do it? How did you get to do it? And like, hey, you were just blessed, and we'd never be able to do that. Well, you could, because I started from a town in Clinton, South Carolina. That's where I was born, and I live in the town of Perry, Georgia, both of which are small towns. So it doesn't matter where you are. As I've shown in the first two installments of this trip, that it can be you can be from anywhere, anywhere. All my life I've heard about Podunk. I don't know if that's a real city or a fictional city, but if you were from Podunk, you were just from the smallest of the small. And Clinton and Perry are very small. But when I left you last time, I've done two installments of this. This is the third. I was writing for the House and Home Journal, which is my local newspaper. I had an entertainment column called That's Entertainment. I had a book review column called Novel Ideas. And then we had started a third column. Bobby Branch, the managing editor, owner, had convinced me to write a third column about television and other aspects of the arts. And I did it under an alias of Rock Dixon. And I had gotten that name when I was a teenager and used it based on Rock Hudson, the movie star, and then a local athlete who was just the most renowned person in Lawrence County, where I grew up. His name was King Dixon. And sadly, right after I taped the installment number 2, where I talked about my alias, Rock Dixon, I was notified that King Dixon had died. And he had been involved in all aspects of politics, sports, etc. In Lawrence County. I had had the chance to meet him actually in person one time. We weren't best friends or anything like that, but he had known about the story that I had written about in one of my books about changing my name for a summer to Rock Dixon, using Dixon of his last name. It also dawned on me that he was the only person I ever knew who was named King. That's just not a common first name, but I think it was his actual name, and he was called King Dixon all of his life. But he did die last week, and my sympathy goes out to his family. He will be greatly missed in South Carolina. But anyway, I had those three stories going. Rock Dixon's career did not last long. People didn't seem to like to read things by Rock Dixon. They saw him as competition to me. And I will say I was fairly popular in the newspaper, with my, That's Entertainment and Novel Ideas. And people complained that they didn't know why Bobby Branch had hired Rock Dixon to write anything. So Rock's career was very brief in the newspaper world, and he was gone. But I'm writing for Bobby Branch. I'm going around to other newspapers trying to get my columns in their papers. I had expanded. I was also in the Fort Valley newspaper. And then a big thing happened. And this is where mentors come into your life. Bobby Branch was a mentor to me. He was one who actually put me in the newspaper, got me to doing regular writing, that type of thing. But he decided to sell his newspaper, and he sold it to a man named Millard Grimes. And I thought, oh, this is bad news, because Millard would come in, he'd have his own people that he wanted to do things, and I might be, out of luck. I still had the Fort Valley newspaper, but anyway, Millard came in and he bought the House and Home Journal in Perry. But Millard owned 10 other newspapers. And for whatever reason, when Millard bought the paper, he bought me as a writer. And he thought I was the greatest thing since grits. I don't know what he saw in what I wrote, but he loved it. He said, Jackie, I want you to be in every other newspaper that I own. He owned a magazine that was, known throughout the state of Georgia and the South. He would have me do personality profiles for that magazine. He just was amazing to me. Why he liked my writing so much, I don't know. And he never said. But as long as he owned those papers, he carried me in every one of them. And then, like I said, he would call me up and he'd say, hey, I want to, there's a movie being filmed and so is in it. And I'd like for you to, do an interview with them. Or there's a Georgia author who's really getting a lot of fame. Could you do a story, on them? And that's how I got to interview William Deal, who wrote Sharky's Machine and Primal Fear. That's how I got to know Terry Kay. I did personality profiles on them, and it was fantastic. I have to tell you a quick story. William Deal, if you get a chance, look up the movies Primal Fear and Sharky's Machine. Primal Fear starred Richard Gere. Sharky's Machine starred Burt Reynolds. But they're good movies, and they're based on books by William Deal. But Millard Grimes asked me to do an interview, see if I could get an interview with William Deal, because he had these big books that were being made into movies, and he lived at St. Simons. I think that's where he lived at the time. So I got in touch with his publisher, found out his publicity representative, and said I would like an interview, and gave her my information. And I thought, well, I'll hear from her, and maybe she'll set something up. But a few days later, the phone rang, and I said hello, and this guy with this really raspy voice said, is this Jackie K. Cooper? And I said, yes, it is. And he said, this is William Deal. I hear you want to talk to me. And I said, yes, and he invited me to his home at St. Simon's. And, we set up an appointment for me to go. It's not that much of a drive to St. Simon's from my house. And I think it was like 10 o'clock in the morning. And I went to, the house. William Deal, ushered me into his den, and we sat down to begin the interview. And it was one of those things of, I met him and I felt like I'd known him 100 years. It was like he was just, and he said, he said to me, he said, hey, this is great. You're my new best friend. And we talked, and it got to be lunchtime, and he went back and asked his wife, Virginia, if she could fix us something to eat. She fixed sandwiches for us. They brought them back in. This is like 12 o'clock. The interview's been going on for 2 hours. We ate our sandwiches, drank our iced tea, kept talking. And then he says to me, did you bring any of my books for me to autograph? I'll autograph books for you. And I said, no, I didn't bring any books with me. And he said, that's all right. And he'd written like 7 books at that time. All popular books. They're great. And I'd read them and reviewed them, but, I didn't take them with me. So he said, don't worry. So he goes back in the back somewhere, and he comes out with 7 books. And he said, okay, I'm going to autograph these for you. And he said, I'm not going to write, other than sign my name, but in this one, I'll write you a little personal note. I thought, that's great. So he wrote something, and then he signed all the other books, signed all the other books, signed all the other books. And by this time, it's 1:30, 2 o'clock. And I said, I have really taken up too much time. Too much of your time. I've got to, I need to leave. I know you've got things to do. Oh, no, you're my new best friend. And so I left with the 7 books, put them in the front seat of my car. I'd been raised not to open the book and read it in front of him. That would have been rude, or according to my upbringing, it would have been rude. But I got about a block away from his house, and I stopped the car, and I grabbed the book that he had written a note to me in it, and it said, to my new best friend, Fred Cooper. Then he signed it, William Deal. Now, my new best friend didn't know my name. I thought we are really close, but that became just a joke between us because we stayed friends. We stayed friends until his death. I met with him several times to talk to him about his books or whatever. And in one of the last books that he wrote, I don't recall the title of it, right off, but he called me up and he said, "Did you get my new book?" And I said, "Yeah, I got it. I'm going to review it." And he said, "Well, I think you'll be pleased." He said, "I told you one time that I used the name of my friends to be characters in the books." And he said, "I think you'll like something here." And so I read the book, and it took place in the 40s, and it was in California, and it concerned the Hollywood scene. And in one of the descriptions of the characters, they go to a movie premiere, and the child actor Jackie Cooper shows up at the premiere. That's all. Just says Jackie Cooper was there. And so I wrote the review of the book, and then Bill called me again, and he said, "Did you see page 121 or whatever it was?" And I said, "Yeah, I saw it." I said, "But that doesn't count." I said, "That was somebody else. That was a child actor who just happens to have my name." And I'll never forget this. He said, "Two birds with one stone, Jackie, two birds with one stone." And he was so proud of himself that he had put my name in his book. So it was a big thing for me too. But, these people come into your life, they influence your life. I asked him one time to write a blurb for one of my books that I had written. And he sent me just a really gracious, glorious statement. And he said, "Use it on any book you write. Just put it on there, because I'll know it applies to every one of them." That was Bill Deal. He was great. And those are things that entered into my career. And I'm going to be telling you even more when we do another episode of my career from there to here. But for today, this has been Jackie K. Cooper's Entertainment Rundown with the third installment of that story.